Okay, well, let's get started. I think there are still people joining, but we will just let them in. Um, so this is our agenda. We want to defend democracy together. And so these are some things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how you can check that you and your friends are registered. We know that we still have folks being purged in Ohio, and there are all kinds of reasons. There's oftentimes, you'd be surprised how many times people think they're registered and they're not. So we want to make sure that people really know how to check to make sure that they're registered. And then I'm going to do a pretty complete voter registration training so that you all feel well equipped to go out and register voters in Ohio. We'll make sure that you know the latest information about mail voting in Ohio. We also want to emphasize to you how important it is for you to share good election and voting information, and being that locus of good information on social media is really important, and we're going to emphasize that. We're going to talk about being a poll worker. That's not on the agenda, but it should be. And we're going to talk about the National Election Protection Program and the Ohio Election Protection Program, and how you can support that program either by participating in it or just by sharing information about it. So those are all things that we are going to go over. So good trouble working to protect elections in Ohio. So just to give you a background, I think you all know all of this, but we know that new laws in Ohio are making it more likely that people will be unable to vote. In other words, disenfranchised. Um, and so it's really important for us to be out there pushing back on that. There's also disinformation and scare tactics. We literally don't need to look any further than the President of the United States last night, spewing a bunch of disinformation. So we want to make sure that we counter these efforts, all the efforts to make people think that elections are illegitimate, or that they are have been rigged, etc. So we can fight this top-down effort by sharing accurate information, by making sure people are registered, by registering people, by sharing the hotline number, by participating as a poll worker, as a poll monitor, as a peacekeeper, etc. All of these are ways. Now, we generally do not ever like to say the word voter fraud. We don't like to talk about it because it isn't a thing. But I'm just making an exception here to just make sure you guys understand that voter fraud, not only is it pretty much non-existent, but it has never and it will never change the outcome of an election, because it's happening, in the 0.00000%. But fear and intimidation tactics and making it harder to vote, yes, those things absolutely can and will change the outcome of elections. And so it's really important that we step up in order to make sure that that doesn't happen. So, with that, the first thing I want to do is show you how to check that you and your friends are registered. And there are two ways to do that. There is the Secretary of State's website, which is voteohio.gov, and that's a pretty straightforward lookup. This is what it looks like when you're on your phone and you have to put in your first name, your last name, and your county. And it looks up by county. So you have to know, you have to remember what county you're registered in. And you also have to know, so the Secretary of State changes his website quite often. And in the past couple of months, I've seen multiple times where there was a CAPTCHA where on your phone you had to check all the crosswalks or all the school buses. And I've also seen times when that wasn't on there. So sometimes it's easier to access and sometimes it's harder to access. I'm going to actually demonstrate it to you in a second. There's also another app which was built by a friend of ours, and it's literally just an app it uses the information from the voter rolls from the Secretary of State's office. And the benefits of this system are that it looks up in all counties at once, and it tells you immediately if you or the voter that you're looking up is in confirmation status. And what confirmation status means is that you're kind of in a pile of people who are they're going to have to vote provisionally because there's something wrong with their voter registration didn't go through properly, or they haven't voted in so long that they're about to be purged. And we want to know that right away. You can find it out at voteohio.gov, but not immediately. So here goes. Let me show you both ways. So here is Frank LaRose's website. This is what it looks like on a laptop, but it's not that dissimilar on your phone. And I'm going to go to the place where it says check voter registration. I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm going to put in my name and my county, and I'm going to submit it. And here are all the Mia Lewises in Franklin County. Oh my God, I thought I had an unusual special name. Turns out not at all. Um, um, and I can see that I'm registered, but I'd have to actually click on these in order to see if I was in confirmation status. So that is the disadvantage of this, because you could see yourself and think, oh, great, I'm registered, but you don't know that you're actually in confirmation status. Now let's look at voteforohio.com. So this one looks a little different, and I really like this tool, but you have to know how to use it. And it has like one special trick. The one special trick is that you want to put in as little information as possible. But when you put partial information, you have to put an asterisk after the partial information. So I literally don't even need to put in my full first name. I can just put M and an asterisk. I can put Lou, um, sorry, and an asterisk. And let's see what happens there. I'm probably going to get way too many way too many things come back. But notice I haven't put in any of the other information, but I have put an asterisk because if I don't, it would only give me the things that were exactly that. So let's see how many I have here. So many, way too many. So, but you'll see here that you can see the people who are in confirmation status, and it brings them up right away. Well, let's go back, and what if I add my street address, just the number, followed by an asterisk, because I have to put an asterisk anytime there's information missing. So I could put my street name, but if I didn't put road, I would have to put the asterisk. Now let's see what happens. Oh, there's only 3 people who are M. Lou who live at their address starts with 437. So there I've gotten it, and one of them is in confirmation status. So that person would have to fill out a new voter registration in order to have their registration be updated. So when I go out to do voter registration, I usually load up the voteforohio.com on my phone so that I can quickly do that with people if I'm offering to check and I'm checking their registration. So that's just something that I recommend. Yeah. All right. So this is really important. As I mentioned, many people, you'd be shocked how many people think they're registered and they're not. Maybe they filled something else out. Maybe they were taken off the rolls. Maybe they're looking up in the wrong county, because sometimes when people look up using the Secretary of State's website, they look up in one county, but they forgot that they used to be registered in another county. So it's a really good thing. And also, if you ask someone if they're registered, they're usually going to say yes. But if you say, hey, do you want to just check your registration to make sure that you're up to date? That's something else. That's much more likely that people will say yes. Another thing, this is kind of a cool thing that we don't talk about a lot, but there's this organization. It actually started, through a university. Folks were trying to figure out how they could help voters in a time when people feel nervous about their registrations. And Vote Flare is an organization which basically what it does is you sign up and then it alerts you if there's any change in your registration. So if someone moves you into confirmation status, or if they take you off the rolls, or if you update your address or anything else changes or happens to your registration, it will send you a notification. It's very simple. You just basically you go to voteflare.org and you sign up and you just get yourself on that list, and hopefully you never hear from them. But if something changes in your registration, you will be alerted, and that is kind of can give you some confidence. So that's a good thing to share with people. All right, let's do a quick voter registration training. Let's get out there. Let's get our wonderful clipboards and our voter registration forms, and let's get out there and register some voters. You can get forms from your county board of elections. You can get some brightly colored clipboards and head to any place that you think that you'll be able to find some voters who need to update or need to check or need to get registered. And don't, if you decide to do this, don't be worried if you don't get a lot of registrations. Just being out there and reminding people about voting is important as well. And do remember that when you do this, if you get some completed forms, you have to turn them in to your local board of elections within 10 days. So the date that they sign is you're going to turn those in within 10 days. Now, sometimes your local board will give you a pass if it's a day late or whatever. So obviously don't ever throw away a voter registration. Bring it to the board no matter what, but you want to do that as quickly, as promptly as possible. So in terms of the rules, who can register people to vote in Ohio? Anybody can. There are literally no restrictions. You don't have to be a citizen. You don't have to be 18, nothing. Anybody who can do it. Who can register? You have to be a citizen. You have to be an Ohio resident. You have to be 18 by the next general election. And you have to not be currently serving a felony conviction. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But unless you're literally serving that conviction for that felony at that time, you are eligible to vote. And what do you need in order to be able to register? You just need an Ohio license or temp license or state ID, or if you don't have any of those, the last four of your social. Now, in terms of approaching voters, you really never want to say to somebody, are you registered to vote? Did you register to vote? Because people will always say yes. And it's kind of like it's like you're accusing them of not having filled their civic duty. You don't want to do that. You're offering them a service like, hey, would you like to check your registration? Have you moved since you last voted? Sometimes I look at people, I look at their age and I say, anybody turning 18 by November 3rd? And I would just say, like, if you're in a festival or something, people generally, they're probably a little bit hesitant to engage with you. So you're just watching their faces carefully. And sometimes you'll see like a couple of friends, and if you offer to register someone and one turns to the other and goes like that, it's like that's a tell that one of them knows that the other one isn't registered or needs to register or needs to update their registration. So watch them carefully and see what their responses are. And then you can say, do you need to register? We can do it really quick. And that's always helpful. So don't put people on the spot, and make sure that you're offering them a service. You're being helpful. Okay, and then this is my very shortest voter registration tip. Fill out the form. Fill out the form. You're good to go. Make sure it's legible. Make sure all the boxes are completed. Generally, we like to highlight forms because it makes it, it makes it easier to see what parts do need to be completed. So if you have a chance, you can highlight your forms. Use a blue or black pen. And then really, really important, make sure that they write legibly. That is literally the most important thing. And one way that we do that is when people are filling out a form, we actually kind of hover over them and point to each box. And we say, um, super, super legible. Please print. Okay, and you're going to put your last name here. You're going to put your first name here, and you're literally going through each line with them carefully to make sure that they are following along and to make sure that they're filling out every highlighted box or every box that needs to be completed. And so you're helping them, you're guiding them, and you're checking it before they leave. Because as folks who are doing the registration, we're not supposed to write on the forms, especially not after the voter leaves. The voter can correct anything. So it's really good to make sure you've read through it before they leave. Common mistakes. Now, you may have noticed already there's a new form. There was a new form not that long ago, but this is a new form. So I have some examples from both forms on here. And it's really up to your local Board of Elections which forms they are and aren't accepting. I'm going to hope that they're accepting, the recent one, but you really want to check with them and make sure if you're using forms from like 2 forms ago, you want to check in with them and make sure they're accepting that. The most important box on this whole form is, are you a citizen? Because obviously, if they're not a citizen, they cannot and should not fill out the form. End of story. They're not a citizen. Sorry, not for you. So this is incredibly important. You want to make sure that that box is checked. You can't make any assumptions. You want to make sure that box is checked. And you also want to check for that illegible handwriting. If you can't read it, the person transcribing can't read it. If their name is actually Malika and it looks like Manika and they get registered as Manika and they go to vote, Malika is not registered. So it is really, really important that everything be legible. Sometimes people put country instead of county. Sometimes they mix up the birth date and today's date. Sometimes they don't put their Ohio driver's license. Ohio driver's license is 2 letters and 6 numbers. That's true for your license, for your temp, or for your state ID. And so anybody who, it doesn't have 2 letters and 6 numbers is possibly using a license from another state, and we definitely don't want that. We do want the mail to be deliverable, so we want to include that apartment number. And I would check with people, is there an apartment number? Because they need to be able to receive mail at that address. Because, first of all, for mail ballots, but also for getting correspondence from the Board of Elections. Um, I have a form here with some mistakes on it. Um, Anybody in the chat? What are some of the mistakes? I'll go through this really quickly, I promise. Any mistakes that people can see? The date. It is definitely not 2004 today. No zip code. Zip code isn't required, but it's helpful. Citizenship box. Excellent. I signed outside the box. Do you know why that's important? Because they take a digital image of whatever's inside the dotted line. So half of my signature is not included. So when I go to vote and they compare my signature to what is on here, it's not going to look right. So that's actually important. Incorrect birth date. Exactly. The county says Ohio. The license number is not correct. It's 2 letters and 4 numbers. That is not correct. So you guys got all this figured out. Thank you. That's wonderful. The new forms have a space at the bottom to put if you helped the person fill it out, if the person was blind, disabled, or illiterate. And they also have the newest form has a place at the bottom to say if you were paid to collect the voter registration. So just something to keep in mind. If you have helped the person, you can fill that part out. The newest form also emphasizes the fact that you are supposed to use driver's license if you have one. And there's a spot there to say, I have not been issued with one. Um, 1 second, Elisa. If you haven't been issued with one, you can use the last four of your social. Now, I will just say that if the person doesn't have their license with them, they can't remember the number, go ahead and use the last four, because in all likelihood, your county board of elections will say that that's fine. But if they have a license, encourage them to use the license. So helping a person means, like in the past, we would say it's completely fine for you as the person doing the voter registration to fill out the whole form and have them sign. Some people prefer that because they know their handwriting is better, they're, faster at it, they're going to make, fewer mistakes. The Secretary of State doesn't want us to do that anymore. They want the voter to fill out the whole form unless they're incapable of filling it out because of disability, blindness, et cetera. If you have somebody who is ill, like they have a physical reason or they're sick, whatever it is that they cannot fill out the form or it's really difficult for them to fill out the form, it is fine. It is fine for you to fill out that form, and you can sign. So yeah, the law hasn't changed, and but it is it's interesting because on the previous form, it had this same language, but it was in tiny print at the top, and we kind of never noticed it. Now it's up front and center. The reason that they're doing it is because they're running these background checks with the information against what's at the BMV. So they want to easily be able to have the person's license number in order to look it up at the BMV. But, do the best you can. I would say that the people at the Board of Elections want people to be registered and they want them to be able to vote. So they're not going to disqualify you for anything like not putting road or not having your middle name match, or you've crossed something out and you've changed it. Abbreviations are fine. As long as you can really uh, as long as you can read it and it all makes sense, that's fine. Greg, yes, they prefer driver's license. In fact, they're now saying they require it if you have one. But what I'm saying is, you know, if they have one, but it's not there and they can't remember the number, don't not register them because they don't have the license right there. I don't think they changed it to 5 days. I think it's still 10 days. If I'm incorrect, I will look into that. But I don't think that they've changed it. I'm going to go on because I don't want to run out of time here. Um, this is important though. You do want the voter to know that they're going to get a letter from the BOE. You're going to submit the form and the BOE is going to register them and they're going to send a letter and they're going to confirm the registration, and the voter should check, is everything spelled correctly? Is everything on there correct? And it's going to have their data, it's going to have the ID they need to vote, it's going to have their polling location, it's going to have all the good information. And you want to remind the voter that they need an unexpired ID in order to be able to vote in the election. But we are in a time now where they're doing these back end checks. They're doing back end checks for citizenship. They're doing back end checks for a mismatch between the BMV and the registration. And so if there's any issue with the registration, like it was illegible or they think that you're not a citizen because your license says you're not a citizen. They don't know that you were naturalized after that, or there's a mismatch or something. They're going to get a letter from the BOE and they have to respond to that letter. So this is why it's really important that they be able to receive mail at the address that they give. So, and we need them to resolve that issue before the election. Otherwise, they're going to have to vote provisionally and they'll only have 4 days to cure after the election. So this is something that we need to remind people. Absentee ballots, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it's really nice when you're out doing voter registration if you offer absentee ballots as well. And Catherine pointed out, like registering someone is great, but they still have to actually get out there and vote. When you offer someone an absentee ballot application and they fill it out, you're literally sending a ballot to their home, which is a little bit closer to having them actually vote. And the thing to remember here is that number three is the address that should match your voter registration. If they want the ballot sent to their home, that's all they need. If they're not going to be home and they're going to be somewhere else, they put that other address in number four. And then the important thing to remember is that they can track their ballot, and tracking their ballot will let them know when the board received their application, when the board mailed the ballot, when the board received the voted ballot, and when the board counted the voted ballot. And also let folks know, sometimes people request a ballot and then they get panicked because they haven't received it right away. They're not going to start mailing them out until October 6th this year. They don't start mailing them out until the beginning of early vote. We also need folks to know that the law has changed again, and we now no longer have the 4 days grace period for ballots to arrive, and ballots must be received by the close of elections, 7:30 p.m. on election day at the Board of Elections. So if you're going to put it in the mail, give yourself plenty of time or take it to that drop box. That's really, really important. Okay, what ID is needed? An unexpired photo ID, Ohio driver's license, temp license, or state ID, U.S. passport, or military or veterans ID. If people don't have an ID, they can get one for free at the BMV, and the organization Vote Riders can help you. Students can vote. They can register and vote if they're 17, but they'll be 18 by the election. Paper forms are better for students. And students have a choice of registering at their campus address or their home address. But if they are going to vote in person, they need to make sure they have that ID. And we also, really, there are things that make it difficult for students to vote by mail. For example, they need to get a stamp. Most students have never used a stamp. They don't even know what a stamp is. So that makes it a little trickier for them. So we try to encourage folks to register at their campus address if they, if they can. And remember, sorry, I'm going to just go back one slide. Remember that when you're voting in person, your ID, the address on your ID does not need to match your voter registration address. You will sometimes come across someone who's working the polls who gets that wrong, but please insist it doesn't need to match. Out-of-state students, they can choose whether they vote in Ohio or they vote absentee from their home state. But if they do vote in Ohio, they can vote in person if they have a passport or a military ID. If they don't, then they're going to have to vote by mail. And voting by mail, again, we want to start that process as quickly as possible so that we don't run out of time. Can you vote if you have a previous felony conviction or you've been in prison? Yes. A good thing about voting in Ohio, if you were convicted in the past and you served your time, if you're on probation, if you're on parole, if you're currently in jail waiting trial, or if you're currently in jail for a misdemeanor, all of those people can vote. They can register. Now, if you were convicted of a felony, you are removed from the rolls. And then after you serve your time, you go out into the world and nobody tells you that you are eligible to register again. I promise you there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people in Ohio now who've served their time and are ready to get back into, participating in civic life in Ohio who do not know that they are eligible to register again. So it's really a wonderful thing when you can let someone know that, yes, they now can register again, and you can register them. We do have good provisions also in Ohio for unhoused voters. I'm going to say check in with your local board of elections to what they prefer. They may have an address of a shelter that they want you to use, or they may have a particular way that they want you to register people. We also have something called Safe at Home in Ohio, which is for victims of domestic violence. And that is an application which you and I cannot do. It has to be done by specially licensed people or the Board of Elections. And it essentially what it does is it registers them to vote, but their name and address don't get on the public voter rolls so that they can be safe. And that's a great thing. So I'm just wrapping up here. Best practices. When you're out there and you're talking to voters, never assume that they know the stuff that you know. I promise you that you know more than they do. They may not even know that there's an election every year. They may not know that there's a primary. So, just get chatting. Tell them about when the election is, what's on the ballot. Don't forget to remind them about that letter that's coming from the BOE. Let them know about early vote. If you have the hours with you, that's awesome. If they're doing an absentee ballot, definitely let them know about tracking and when the ballots will be sent, and that they need to turn that ballot in it has to be received by 7:30 p.m. on election day. That is it, folks, from me. So that's everything about voter registration. I think it's great to just carry a clipboard around with you in case you come across someone who needs to update their registration. It's very funny. Camille is coming to present in about 2 slides, and she just entered. Perfect timing, Camille. So you're going to get these slides. You're going to have all this information. I'm also happy to answer any questions. You can email, text, or message me anytime, and I'm happy to answer questions. And I also would recommend that you check in with your local board of elections because, we have this system in Ohio where each county is allowed to do slightly different things. Some counties may be taking those old forms and other counties may not, and et cetera. So check in with your local board. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn over to Catherine Terser, who's going to tell you about another way that you can support elections and protect democracy.
Well, I do think that there are a lot of ways to take action. I also think some of them are so easy, and many of us spend time on social media. It's so important right now. There is so much bad information out there about elections. Certainly, President Trump is still fixated on election 2020. What happens in one state, sometimes people will be like, oh, well, I know that people can't actually vote because they went to prison. Well, that's true in some states, but not Ohio. So there's just a ton of misinformation. And one of the really simple ways that we can support one another is sharing social media information, just getting that good information out there. And if you're looking for good folks to follow, to share, in the resource doc that I've been sharing, it includes just kind of examples of like, oh, check out, the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition on Instagram, or here you can check the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. I just think this is a really simple way to do this. And then if you're willing to move, I was going to say this is an incredibly important way to actually ensure that we have good elections. Now, remember, Ohio is one of those states where we do it like Noah's Ark. There's a Democrat and a Republican, and our whole process is really thought out. There's an election administration manual. There's an election plan. There are all sorts of good ways and good information out there. And being a poll worker is a very, very long day. It's a very long day, but it is a way where we can make a real difference. We're there to assist voters, and they do not do shifts for poll workers, in part because of the challenge of always making sure there's a Democrat and a Republican, making sure that throughout the day there is consistency. So we are not a state that they do shifts. It ends up being a very long day, but a day that is incredibly important. I encourage you, if you're like, let's see what's going on with poll workers, you can actually track to see places that have struggles getting enough poll workers. And then, there are special programs the Secretary of State has established, including Styling for Democracy, which is, you might imagine, with barber shops and beauty parlors and going off to your neighborhood spa. I think it's wonderful that this is an opportunity to do voter registration there. And then the other thing that's important is the youth at the booth. Many poll workers are a little older, and this is a program for 17-year-olds, for high school seniors to actually participate and help. And, I think it's important to think about, someone that gets down on their knees and plugs the machine in, for example, that is really, it's an opportunity to learn. And because voting is a habit, this is a way to really encourage people. I love, give a day for democracy. That encourages businesses to essentially say to their employees, you have the day off. Go off, go be a poll worker. And permits them not to go to work that day. And there are opportunities for continuing ed credit. And I love that we have encouragement of, lots of people will be like, well, I don't really need the pay. And it's right before Christmas. There's a program called Work a Day, Donate Your Pay. And so I would, encourage you thinking about like all the different programs the Secretary of State has, and it's easy to sign up at your local Board of Election or Secretary of State.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you for all
Hmm.
these questions in the chat. I'm going through and I'm gonna answer some of them. Now I am super excited and pleased to introduce Camille Wimbish, who is the National Director of Campaigns and Field Programs for the Election Protection Coalition under the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law. And Camille, please tell us about election protection. What is that?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on to talk to you about a project that's near and dear to my heart, election protection. Election protection is the nation's largest and longest running voter protection program in the country. There's over 300 national, state, and local organizations that are part of this nonpartisan coalition. We essentially take thousands and thousands of volunteers who are everyday folks who are out in the field helping voters at polling locations and connect them with our 866 Our Vote election protection hotline, as well as the other languages that are supported to make sure that we're getting questions from voters, being able to respond to any problems that people are having voting, and generally just keeping all of the data and troubleshooting that we need to really have a sense of protecting voting access. So we got our start after the 2000 election in Florida when there were all those long lines and hanging chads and troublesome issues. And we took a few attorneys and a hotline, and now we've evolved to a year-round, really large mobilization effort. So we have over 40 states who participate. Next slide. We've got hundreds of national and state local partners, like I've mentioned, who are all working together. There are several lines that are supported in different languages. So 866 Our Vote is the English language line. Voters can also seek assistance in Spanish at 888 VE Vota. There are over 9 Asian languages that are supported at 888 API Vote. And there is also Arabic at 844 Yalla US. But anyone who contacts 866 Our Vote, whether you're calling or texting or chatting, you can request language access and be redirected to one of the appropriate language lines. And those lines are available year round. So that's really important for folks to know that it doesn't matter the day, that someone will see that you've contacted us and we will make sure that we get you guys support.
Awesome.
Sign language is not supported, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Camille. And Camille used to work with Catherine and me on the Ohio election protection program, and then she went up to the national program. But Dylan Sellers from Common Cause Ohio is going to tell us about our Ohio program and ways that you can get involved. And thank you so much, Camille.
Good to see you, Camille. Yes, I am going to tell you about our Ohio Election Protection Program, and I'm seeing a couple familiar faces on the call today. And so some of you I will be singing to the choir. And so what I like to say is when you've heard this before, make sure you share it with a friend. Okay. So our nonpartisan program runs through the Ohio Voting Rights Coalition, which is a coalition of Ohio-based organizations that are looking to protect your rights, right? Looking to make sure that you have access to the ballot and have all of the tools that you need to be involved. So that's going to entail promoting the 866-R vote hotline, like was discussed with Camille. Supports voters at polling locations and answers their questions, responds to reported problems, shares reliable resources. Always check your sources, friends. And attends Board of Election meetings to track elections progress. So we kind of cover a wide gamut. How do you get involved? This is the thing that you want to remember. This is the thing you want to write down. Sign up at protectthevote.net to join Ohio election protection efforts. So that's the website that you're going to share with your friends, the one that you're going to fill out so that you might become a poll monitor. Maybe you want to distribute yarn signs and materials. Maybe you want to be the person who's showing up to the Board of Elections meetings to monitor what's going on. That is going to be the way that you get in contact with us. And if you fill out that, you'll get a phone call from me and an email from OVRC to welcome you in and tell you how you can get involved. There are other roles that the election protection volunteer could get involved in. There's social media outreach, our command center, peacekeepers, which is de-escalation, and legal support.
And speaking of legal support, Maria Bruno, are you here?
I am
You
here.
are. Awesome. Maria's going to tell us, this is going to be a little bit new for us in Ohio this year. So Maria's going to tell us about the Legal Engagement Election Protection Program.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Bruno. Yeah, I will be facilitating the Lawyer Engagement Election Protection Program, which is working in conjunction with the existing election protection efforts to essentially supplement the efforts we've done in past years to make sure that we are ready for some of the novel issues that we sort of expect to / have already come to fruition in 2026. So specifically, we will be recruiting legal experts, including law students, to assist us in everything from litigation and advocacy opportunities to on-the-ground monitoring, protecting poll workers and voters, quickly responding to novel legal questions and controversies. And ultimately, the goal is to build a nonpartisan network of respected leaders in the legal field that can essentially stand up for the rule of law, regardless of how much some of our leaders at the White House try to prevent us from doing so. We are going to work very hard to make sure that the legal norms and the election protection standards are upheld and protected. We'll be plugging in with the existing election protection efforts. So this is not a duplicative effort. But if you're like, I'm not an election law lawyer, but I want to help, there are still a million ways for you to be helpful and use that degree or that education if you're a student. So please, and including there will be training opportunities to talk more deeply about election law and norms to ensure that our legal profession is ready and knowledgeable and cannot be subjected to disinformation and things like that. So thank you, Mia, for allowing me the space. We do have a sign-up form, so anyone who's interested, just fill out the form and we will follow up with you. The form itself asks a little bit about your background and your experience so that we can actually align you with opportunities that make sense for your expertise. And that's it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And that form, along with all the other links and things, will come in a follow-up with the recording and the slides after this. But back to Dylan.
Yes, back to me. Thanks again, Maria. That was great. And timeline for volunteering. can you expect to get going with what? August through November, we'll be distributing materials in your neighborhood, Board of Elections monitoring, and social media outreach. So that time frame, August and November, that is pretty much right now through the election. If you need materials in your neighborhoods, if you want to go to these Board of Election meetings, if you want to share some things on social media, that stuff can start happening right now and it'll be all the way through the election. But in October is when the poll monitors start. Why in October? Because that's when early voting starts, right? So that's our distinction there. In October, early voting starts all the way through election day. We'll have some poll monitors, peacekeepers, just making sure that things are moving the way that they want to move. And that's who's going to be involved where in the time.
Awesome.
Join today.
Yeah, and so these are the links, and again, we will send these out, and you will have these available to you. And this, again, the election protection in Ohio is through the OVRC, which is the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition. So that's Common Cause, League of Women Voters, ACLU, All Voting is Local, Ohio Voice. It's a coalition. And then we're working with this larger national coalition, which is, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law and all of those other groups. There's a lot of organizations that are wanting to jump in and do some election protection work this year. There may be other efforts that are separate, but to the extent that we cannot be duplicative, that's great. And, kind of at least work together and make sure we're covering the same things. But de-escalation trainings. Sorry, I just jumped in, Dylan. Sorry. These are the dates for these trainings that are going to be around the state, which is awesome that, they're not going to be just in Columbus. And well, Dylan, there's also a summit. I didn't include a slide about it, but we will have an election protection summit in September. And then the very last thing I wanted to say is, even if you don't sign up to be a poll worker, or even if you don't sign up to be a poll monitor, just spreading the word about the 866 Our Vote hotline is incredibly important, because it's this national, nonpartisan resource, that's available. And if people don't know about it, they can't use it. So it's only by spreading the word about this number that we can actually help people. So we have yard signs, we have little business cards about it, we have little posters, we have all different kinds of things where you can, put things up in coffee shops, whatever it is. Ask your church if they'll put up an election protection yard sign. So just spreading the word about the hotline number is incredibly important. That's what we have for you folks. I was so worried about it taking too much time that we've ended up with 10 extra minutes. We're happy to answer questions, but what we're trying to do again is just give you a choice of things that you can do, and you can do more than one. You can share on social media, you can register voters, and you can be a poll monitor or a peacekeeper. Be a poll worker, any of these things. But just sharing that accurate information. We want to have a balance between people understanding that there are issues that are coming up with this election, but we never want them to feel like there's no point, or it's all rigged or whatever. We want them to feel exactly this. Hell no, you're not taking my vote away. Yes, I'm going to vote. Yes, I'm going to make sure that I'm registered. Yes, I'm going to make sure that my friends are registered. Yes, I'm going to get out there and be the eyes and ears on the ground at the polling place to make sure that nothing fishy is going on. So don't spread cataclysmic worry about the election, but do spread good information and do encourage people to participate. Questions. Catherine, Dylan, Camille, Maria, anything we need to cover? Yes, the hotline is for general voting and elections issues. People will call and say, am I registered? What's my polling place? Or they'll say, there was somebody at the polling place who was, shouting at me and making me feel, or I had to vote provisionally and I don't understand why, or, anything relating to actually voting.
There was a question about vote for Ohio that came from
Yeah.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So it is a retirement project of a friend. I think Julie explained he used to be I'm just scrolling back up through, um, he was a data scientist of some way, and he literally just downloads the voter file from the Secretary of State's office, and he does it like daily or weekly or something like that. And then he just developed an app himself personally, that can search in all 88 counties at once. So it's the identical information that goes into it, and he's not tracking that in any way. It's all public record information. And it's just literally to make it faster for us to look people up. And that's really all there is to it. Happy to put you in touch with him if you have any like really specific questions. Will the SOS be sending out absentee ballot applications this year to all registered voters? Catherine, will they?
Yeah, not as far as I know.
Yeah.
Basically, he's only permitted to do it if there's funding for it, and there wasn't funding for it in the budget. Now, I mean, they could redo it. Greg, you were coming off. Do you know something
Yeah, I
different?
just wanted to. We were getting that at the doors a couple weeks ago about whether or not people should fill out our vote by mail application, and they were saying they're waiting for their application to come from the Secretary of State. So just wanted to clarify whether or not that was going to happen or not.
Yeah, as far as I know, and based on the budget, no. Um,
Okay.
so so just encouraging people, I think the thing that's confusing is, it used to be something that came out, every even numbered year. And that, then there was people were saying, "Oh, it's so confusing, it doesn't come out in odd numbered years." And then there was like, Franklin County would do it and Cuyahoga County would do it, but other counties wouldn't. And there was a sense of like, well, wait a second, this seems to be confusing to people. And as opposed to saying it's confusing to people, let's come up with a solution that impacts everybody. Like they said, oh, what we should do is only do it if the Secretary of State does it and only if there's resources for it.
I will
Yeah.
say
In
though,
other
uh,
words, let's rein it in.
Um, Greg, there are organizations that do send out both voter registration forms and absentee ballot request forms. They kind of annoy the Secretary of State because they aren't official. But and sometimes people get worried about them because they think that they're fraudulent. Usually I mean, I'm going to say they're not fraudulent. They're organizations that are trying to help get people participating in our democracy. And so they send these out. But sometimes they can be confusing. There were some issues with some of the forms in the past where they were like partially filled out, and people then thought, "Oh, I don't need to complete it," and then it wasn't an accurate information. But for instance, a bunch of voter registration forms just got sent out. Those are literally the forms from the Secretary of State's office. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They can fill them out. They can send them in. And I'm guessing that there will be targeted mailings of absentee ballot applications as well. It's going to annoy Frank LaRose, but hey, quite a few things annoy him. Um,
Uh, yeah. Well,
um,
thanks. There's a lot of
yeah,
confusion out about that. So thanks for helping to clear some of that up.
yeah. I'm looking at other questions. Yeah, I don't think it matters whether you cross out or scribble, as long as what's there in the end is you can read it clearly, that's fine. Yeah. And the answer to Mary about our poll monitor different than an election protection volunteer, as I mentioned, there are a lot of groups. There's a lot of groups that, are worried about our democracy, and they are in a meeting and they say, we should protect the elections. Let's do election protection. And they're maybe not aware of the existing election protection program. So they may send you an email saying, join our election protection program. And that may be different from the one that we've been describing. So I can't say 100% for sure that they're the same thing, but hopefully they're the same thing. If it has anything to do with 866 Our Vote, or if it comes from the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition or any of our coalition members, then yes, it's the same thing. But every once in a
And
while,
I,
there's
I thought, Mia, I thought it was worth saying that there are different ways to volunteer for election protection. So
yes, of
there's,
course,
the
yes.
lawyers, and there are the peacekeepers, and there are the ambassadors that distribute information. Because of course, we can't be at every polling location. So that's the other thing. Sometimes when people say I'm a poll monitor, it can be the election protection program, or they can be part of the election protection program and doing something completely different.
Yeah. Mhm. For sure. Um, so yeah, about the forms again, Karen, like the very newest form, I wouldn't worry about having the very newest form, but there's one previous to that. The one further back than that, I would check in with your BOE before using that older form. Yes, it should be fine, but I just don't want to tell people it's fine and it turns out that the people at their particular BOE
Mhm.
are not accepting those forms. Again, it's always good to check in with your BOE because they may have um, other questions. I see they may have other ways they do it. Nancy Long had a good question. Would it be more practical to help people register to vote online? And I'm going to answer that by saying no. I mean, it's good to share that website and that information. And actually, Common Cause is just printing up these business cards that have the Secretary of State's website where they can register and check and update and all that stuff. But very often, the people are not able to use the online registration for a variety of reasons. If their license number doesn't match their current address, they can't use the online registration. If they are a younger person and they don't have a license, they can't use the registration system. Sometimes you go through the online and at the end it says print this form and take it to your BOE and sign it. Well, a lot of people don't have printers. So it's a fine thing to recommend if you don't have the opportunity to actually get them to fill out a paper form. If a paper form is better if if that's an option. All right, what other questions do we have? My spouse was a poll worker. Oh my goodness. I do not. I would, and I wonder if yeah, I was reach out to the Secretary of State. Yeah, and Catherine's gonna help follow up with
So
that.
I don't necessarily have an answer. I want to be super clear about that, but I think reaching out to Secretary of State makes the best sense because this sounds like some kind of weird, something very odd. So I'd start with that. And then if you're still having a challenge, the thing that I would say is send me an email. I will try to figure it out.
Now, the question about forms. So there are forms that come from the Secretary of State, and there are forms that come from each individual county. Whether it's a county form or the Secretary of State's form, it doesn't matter. If I have a form that's from Franklin County and I live in Hamilton County, I can use the Franklin County form. It doesn't matter. It's all the same information. And also, you can submit forms from any county to any other county BOE, and they are required to send it to the correct BOE. So sometimes, I'm here in Columbus, we're at Pride. I've had a situation we had VR forms from 60 different counties, from Pride. And I usually am very kind and I sort them by county and I sort them alphabetically and I put a little note on them and I bring them to the BOE and they are happy to send them to the other places. And make friends with your BOE people. Those folks work so hard and they really, really appreciate being thanked and being appreciated. The folks that work at the Board of Elections are often the recipients of a lot of nonsense. And so you will be amazed at how appreciative they are when when you thank them and when you hand them forms which are really well filled out, that don't have a lot of errors, when you hand them in on time, when you do all those things that make their lives easy, that is great. And I will say, if you get a form that you realize afterwards the person didn't put their ID, or you realize afterwards the person didn't fill out this, didn't check if they're a citizen, and you're worried about whether that person will be able to be registered, this is what I would recommend if you really want to be like super duper conscientious. I would submit that form to the BOE, even though it has errors. But at the same time, I would mail a new form to that person at their address and just say, "Hey, you filled out a registration form with me, but I saw that it didn't include X and Y. And so you can, fill this out again and you can submit it to your BOE, you can mail it in. Also, just remember, folks, that there's no penalty for filling out more than one registration form. So if someone is like, I'm not sure if I'm registered, well, first of all, you can check on your phone if they're registered. But if they aren't sure whether they filled out a form a few weeks ago or they're not sure, it doesn't matter. You can always fill out another form. There's no penalty for that. And if someone is getting up in years and their handwriting might be changing, their signature might be changing, it's actually a great idea to fill out another paper form, because the most recent paper form updates your voter registration, and it updates your signature. Because I think we all know that someone's signature at age 20 is not necessarily the same as their signature at age 75 or 80. So a recent signature, a recent paper form is going to update that signature. Okay, now we've gone past time.
Well, and you all will get the follow-up, and then if other questions pop up, please send us a note. We want to be able to help.
Yep. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to Catherine, Dylan, Maria, and Camille, and to everybody else. And we will see you soon.